Welcome to the weekly Chinuch Hashkafa message. It is Parshas Vayeitzei. Today I share with you just an interesting Dvar Torah you can share with your children, which could then maybe spark a conversation. So, this week, at the beginning, Parsha is Vayeitzei Yaakov Be'er and Yaakov went out of Be'er Sheva, Vayelech Harana, and he went to Haran. And of course, Rashi already picks up on this, but it's a famous question. Why do we need to know where Yaakov was coming from? We know where Yaakov lived. What's the emphasis? He went out of Be'er Sheva and he went to Haran. Of course, Rashi says the emphasis is because when he went out of Be'er Sheva, when a tzaddik leaves a place, it makes an impression, and so on and so forth. So I'll share with you two ideas. One is just an interesting idea, a nice word. Beis Halevi says that when you leave someone and when you leave a place and go to somewhere else, there's always a question what the emphasis is. Sometimes the destination is not that important. It's about getting out of where you are. Other times, leaving the place is not that important. It's more about the destination where you want to go to. So here, both were true. Because from Yaakov's perspective, the actual leaving was the more important one. He was leaving Be'er Sheva to run away from Esav. However, from the way Yitzchak had instructed Yaakov, really, in Yitzchak's world, he didn't know about the fact that Esav wanted to kill him. So really, for him, the bigger emphasis was going to Haran to look for a wife. So therefore, in Yaakov's case, it was both were important. Vayeitzei Yaakov Be'er Sheva, he left Be'er Sheva, Vayelech Harana, and he went to Haran, both leaving where he was to run away from Esav, going to Haran to look for a shidduch, both of them were actually important. But the Lubavitcher Rebbe says the interesting word because another question has to be asked here. Last week's Parshas Toldos, ends with Yaakov leaving. But there it just says, Vayishma Yaakov listened, Vayelech Padan Aram, and he went towards Padan Aram. Last week's Parsha, which was the beginning of him leaving, it doesn't even say he went away from Be'er Sheva. And only this Parsha does it say Yaakov left Be'er Sheva. So we know that Rashi tells us that what actually happened was he left his father's house, but he spent 14 years in yeshiva, in Shem Ve'ever, to prepare for the time he would arrive in Haran. And he learned Torah, because we know this later when the Torah says that he came and he laid down, he laid down in that place. Rashi says he only laid down there. In the 14 years he was completely immersed in yeshiva, and he wasn't able to even lie down properly. So according to this, we can understand like this. Last week's Parsha, he left Yitzchak's house, but he didn't leave the world of Yitzchak. He was still connected to Yitzchak, because he was in yeshiva. That's why over there doesn't say Vayeitzei Yaakov Be'er Sheva, because he didn't really leave Be'er Sheva. He might have gone to yeshiva, he might have been out of the city walls, but he was still in the world of Be'er Sheva, the world of Kedusha. So, he hadn't really left. He was going towards Padan Aram, but he hadn't actually left Be'er Sheva. In this week's Parsha, it's different. This week's Parsha, Vayeitzei Yaakov Be'er Sheva, Yitzchak leaves yeshiva. He leaves and he's going to Haran, but he's leaving in a way where he's leaving the world of Be'er Sheva, and that's what Torah says, Vayeitzei Yaakov Be'er Sheva in this week's Parsha. Which also explains the division of the Parshas. It's interesting that the division of the Parshas is exactly in the middle of the story. And the explanation is that last week's Parsha is when Yaakov was still in the world, in the house, in the environment of Yitzchak. This week's Parsha starts a new chapter. It starts a chapter of him leaving yeshiva, now going into a new world. The world of Haran, the world of negativity, the world of Lavan, the world of Besuel. I mean, these are different, it's a different kind of world. Tough world, spiritually speaking, Baruchnius. And that's why it's a different Parsha. So, this is the basis. It's a nice word, and it's just a way to explain the Psukim. But of course, it's a basis to introduce a very interesting discussion about our own journey. Our neshama is in this world. Our neshama is a little bit like in Haran. The world, as we know, is a dangerous place. Baruchnius, a spiritually dangerous place. And therefore, just like Yaakov, in order to face that dangerous place, which is what Hashem wants us to do, Hashem wants us to live here. Eventually we need to go out into the world, we have to earn a living, but it's a tough environment, especially nowadays, and that's a discussion you can have with your children, get their input. Why they think the world is a dangerous place, and why they think the world is something an environment which often opposes Kedusha, often opposes the perspective of Torah, very often. the hashkafas, the attitudes that we find in the world are against Torah. But we have to look to Yaakov. How do we survive? And the survival only comes with the preparation. Just like Yaakov, who knew that he's about to go to Gourarie, he needs a dose. He needs a heavy dose of learning. He needs a heavy dose of ruchnius before he can actually go into the world and succeed beruchnius, succeed spiritually. We too are like that. And it happens in different ways. First of all, in our life, we need to talk at a very young age to children that as they go through the school years, as the young years, they're going to spend a good few years in yeshiva. No matter what community they come from, they're going to spend a good few years in yeshiva, because we go into the world when we grow up and we get married. But those yeshiva years, those formative years are so important. We have to chap around, we have to learn as much as we can, spend our focus in Yiddishkeit, in davening and learning and Kedusha. But then even when we do go into the world, we break that down into every day. It is so important when we start the day like a year. We start the day first with davening. We start the day first with learning, like the Gemara tells us. You get up in the morning and then you daven. Umi beis hakneses le beis hamedrash. Then you go from the shul to the beis medrash. You have to learn something first. And then, then you can go into the world. And of course, as parents, we have to reflect, do we do that? Do we make time every day to learn and daven? So we should be able to be strengthened, that when we spend time on worldly things, we're actually fortified enough to be able to withstand the tests and the social pressure and the worldliness, so that we always maintain our focus on Hashem and our focus on Yiddishkeit and our focus on Torah mitzvahs. So these are some of the things that we can bring up, the important lesson that we can learn from the fact that Yaakov actually didn't leave his father's house right away, but he spent time in yeshiva first, the 14 years before he went to the world of Haran, and how important that all is. Have a good day and a wonderful Shabbos.